Lights out for the curfew of your body, soul, and mind. What you have just heard, listeners all over the world, is a warning. And you will hear this warning from here on out. You've been listening to your leaders tell you that there's a great move toward democracy in the world. You witnessed the parting of the Iron Curtain, the fall of the Berlin Wall, the fracturing of the Soviet Union. And this is all supposedly toward a new worldwide democracy. Democracy is a code word for socialism, and that's why our forefathers established a republic. But don't get down, folks. All is not lost. The problem lies within each and every one of you, and therein also lies the answer. I'm your host, William Cooper, and you're listening to The Hour of the Time.
I'm coming back.
Only on 13's Live at 5.
Houston Police Chief Art Acevedo brought his frustrations over gun control to Congress. Yesterday, the chief testified before the House Judiciary Committee in Washington. It was a hearing on gun control, the first hearing in nearly 8 years on gun control. Acevedo called gun violence one of our greatest public health epidemics. He told lawmakers to stop with the prayers and start passing some gun laws.
But I believe that the legislation will save at least one life. And if it's my child who dies, I want him to know, and I want God to know, that I was here today speaking on that life.
Acevedo's appearance comes a week after 4 HPD officers were shot, one hurt during that drug raid. Acevedo said it's time to strengthen universal background checks. He says they should better fund the ATF and give police officers the tools to temporarily remove guns from domestic abusers.
What was going on? Well, it turns out that was a no-knock raid based on the premises that the people who lived at 7815 Harding were selling black tar heroin. Today, the police chief said part of its internal investigation shows that definitely may not be the case. In a remarkable news conference this afternoon, Police Chief Art Acevedo acknowledged what the latest search warrants show, that the lead case agent, Officer Gerald Goins, likely lied to obtain the original no-knock warrant.
More than likely, the investigating officer will be charged with a serious crime at some point.
The original reasoning for that warrant was based on Goins' assertion that a confidential informant purchased black tar heroin from inside 7815 Harding. After the botched raid, where 5 officers were injured and Dennis and Regina Tuttle were killed, the latest search warrant shows a major problem. At one point, the investigating officers wrote in the warrant, quote, "I find an Officer Rodriguez interviewed all of the confidential informants and all denied making a buy for Goins from the residence located at 7815 Harding Street and never purchasing narcotics from Regina Nicholas or Dennis Tuttle." The police chief says the fallout has lots of officers upset.
There are a lot of angry cops. because when you violate that oath of office, you make it hard for 98, 99% of these cops that go out there every day that you all know them. You make their job difficult.
And yet a significant group of those officers right now investigating exactly what happened, what went wrong. If and when anyone will be charged, that will be up to the district attorney's office. It's also important to note that Officer Goins, the officer at the center of all of this, he has been relieved of duty, but he also remains in the hospital, injured from gunshots obtained the night of that botched raid.
The FBI is now investigating is not welcome news to the suspended officers. It could even end up sending them to federal prison. We sent investigative reporter Ted Oberg to figure out the consequences of the newly announced federal action. Ted, this is no laughing matter.
It certainly isn't. The attention not just on those officers, Art, but now that the FBI has come to HPD's door, they are expected to inspect every detail of the now questionable warrant and the way the department handles all manner of similar situations. HPD Chief Art Acevedo says he's talked to the feds from day one about the possibility of a federal investigation.
We welcome that and the spirit of transparency.
It's nice the chief welcomes it, but he doesn't have to. The feds will look where they want and talk to who they desire.
These are very serious matters.
Ken Magidson is a former U.S. attorney for the Southern District of Texas. He's overseen many civil rights probes.
The key question here is whether or not there was a violation of the Fourth Amendment. The Fourth Amendment, again, protects individuals against an unreasonable search and seizure.
The FBI says it is investigating allegations that a search warrant obtained by Houston police officers was based on false, fabricated information.
If a person knows that they did not have probable cause and misleads a magistrate to say that they had probable cause when in fact they didn't, that could be a federal civil rights violation.
Aside from possible charges against the officers, the FBI will determine if this is a widespread practice or problem within HPD, or if there isn't enough supervision to prevent it. In the federal civil rights investigation following the death of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri, no federal charges were brought, but feds insisted on wide-reaching change within the department. For HPD, this is just the beginning.
They should expect a thorough investigation.
The FBI is not shy about prosecutions in cases like this. Last year, 22 law enforcement officers were convicted of federal civil rights crimes. From 2000 to 2007, an average of 80 officials were convicted of color of law or official misconduct violations, more than 600 in all. Officer Goins' attorney, by the way, says she welcomes a third-party independent investigation, claiming the HPD chief has already jumped to conclusions.
Covering new information about the Houston police officer at the center of a criminal investigation. It stems from this botched drug raid that left a couple dead. Now the Harris County District Attorney is reviewing all the past cases of Officer Gerald Goins.
Yeah, we're talking about more than 1,000 cases going back decades, and we're digging deeper as well. KHU 11 Investigates reporter Jeremy Rogowski found some things that just don't add up. What do you see, Jeremy?
Well, Len, to justify his no-knock warrant at the Harding Street home, Gerald Goins claimed that a confidential informant saw a handgun inside, but as we now know, police never recovered that type of weapon. We found similar discrepancies with scores of other drug cases that Officer Goins has filed.
We examined drug cases filed by Gerald Goins all the way back to 2012. Records show 109 of them were based on search warrants. Nearly all of those no-knock warrants, authorizing police to barge in by surprise, just like how the Harding Street raid went down. And just like with Harding Street, Officer Goins almost always claimed in his other cases that it was too dangerous to knock because a confidential informant saw a gun inside. But records show in every single one of those cases we examined, police never recovered a gun.
If an informant said there's a weapon, why isn't there a weapon at the crime scene?
In other drug search warrants we examined, different HPD officers did list the guns they seized. If they don't, former federal agent Larry Carson says that's cause for concern.
There's a couple of questions that come up. One, of course, is the reliability and credibility of the actual informant. The second issue, though, is it raises the issue of, is there an informant?
In the Harding Street raid, Officer Goins is accused of lying about a confidential informant drug buy the very day before police stormed in.
We'll give each case a fair review.
It prompted Harris County District Attorney Kim Ogg to review 1,400 past cases filed by Officer Gerald Goins.
We need to look at the track record and see if possibly we've arrested innocent people or people who aren't guilty of the crimes they're charged with, which is what the district attorney is looking at.
Now, we reached out to the criminal defense attorney for Officer Gerald Goins. Nicole Nabord told me, quote, none of this appears unusual, concerning, or out of the ordinary. Len?
All right, thank you, Jeremy. The KHU-11 investigation.
In Chicago to gun violence and to families who will never recover. No matter how hard I work, more stones will be added until Congress acts. I am here today to urge Congress to pass immediately meaningful gun reform legislation that I believe will begin to minimize how legally purchased guns are used illegally. On behalf of the children, youth, and families of kids off the block, we recommend the following. 1, close loopholes that allow purchases of guns without a background check and reselling of legally purchased guns to underage individuals. 2, strengthen federal penalties against gun trafficking and straw purchases. The current patchwork of state laws allows guns to flow from adjacent states with relaxed gun laws into cities and states with tight gun laws. And 3, federal background checks on all gun purchases, including ammunition and sharing of guns, and ammunition purchases through a national database. Quite simply, no matter how many people KOB or other organizations reach, we will not be able to put an end to gun violence in our country without Congress passing meaningful legislation that keeps guns out of the wrong hands. On a personal note, and to conclude my testimony, for the past 15 years, I have dedicated my life to taking the power of the gun out of the hands of Chicago's most vulnerable youth. I strive to reduce the traumatic effects of gun violence with the most powerful feeling I know, which is hope. I have accomplished this by providing a safe space in my own home to young people aged 10 to 24, opening my door to prevent hundreds of children I serve each year from being victimized by violence in an environment where the odds are already against them, is the least I can do to show them that their community cares. That's all I ask of you, to just care. Thank you, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Saccharin.
Chairman Nadler, Ranking Member Collins, and other members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to be here today to share my experience and perspectives on firearm-related injury and death in America. I'm not testifying on behalf of Johns Hopkins, but rather in my role as a trauma surgeon at Johns Hopkins Hospital, a survivor of gun violence, and a board member of the Brady Campaign. I was born and raised in Fairfax, Virginia, just a stone's throw away from here. As a son of immigrants, my family was living out the American dream. And in a single instant, our lives changed. A fight broke out not far from my high school, and someone pulled out a gun and shot indiscriminately. One moment, I was a carefree 17-year-old senior, and the next collateral damage as a .38 caliber bullet was ripping through my throat and tearing into my shoulder. I spent the next month in the hospital fighting for my life. Make no mistake about it, I'm here today because of the medical professionals who treated me. The second chance inspired me to become a trauma surgeon and give other people that same second chance. As a trauma surgeon, I and my colleagues are uniquely positioned to understand and address this issue. Every day, we are the ones on the front line caring for patients who suffer injuries from bullets. We are the ones trying to stop bleeding from pulverized tissue and torn flesh. We are the ones telling families that their loved ones are never coming home. We are the ones trying to deliver data-driven solutions with inadequate research funding. And we are the ones that understand all too often that the best medical treatment from this crisis is often prevention. For many years, the debate over how we prevent firearm-related injury and death was one that members of my profession were reluctant to broach. That time has come to an end. Some of us have been told that we should stay in our lane. Well, this is our lane, and doing nothing is not an option. And if we do nothing and maintain the status quo, 1 million Americans will be shot in the next decade. Let me be clear, firearm-related injury and death in America is not only a disease, it's a true public health crisis of the United States. Every day, 109 people die from gun violence and over 240 people suffer injuries from bullet wounds. The mass shootings that we've all heard about have become too common and unfortunately capture less than 2% of the entire epidemic we face as a nation. Every day in cities like Baltimore, Philadelphia, Chicago, we have young black men that are killed, and their stories often go untold. We need to recognize this is a multifaceted health problem requiring a diverse group of stakeholders, including, but not limited to, healthcare professionals, public health leaders, survivors, manufacturers, academia, gun owners, and yes, the young people. We must develop a broad, multidisciplinary, multi-strategy system approach that is supported by good science and research. We have the best practices we can learn from. Look at motor vehicle crashes in the 20th century. We initially focused on the drivers. We then broadened that approach from who caused the crash to factors that led to death and injury. And we invested in research. We developed solutions like seatbelts and airbags and safer roads. And since then, we have seen fatalities per mile driven fall by 85%. This is the essence of the public health approach, a multi-sector, research-informed, evidence-based program and policies. So in response, we developed safer cars and roads, and we saved lives. The American College of Surgeons Firearm Strategy Team, a group of surgeon leaders who are firearm owners, recently published a statement describing firearm injury prevention solutions consistent with a public health approach, further underlying that as Americans, we have much more in common than we have that divides us, and there are ways to come together to prevent firearm-related injuries. Congressman Mike Thompson and Peter King introduced the Bipartisan Background Check Expansion Act, H.R. 8, on the anniversary of former Congresswoman Gabby Giffords' near-fatal injury. The bill expands Brady background checks to cover all private firearm sales, including those at gun shows or over the internet. Since the Brady law was implemented in 1994, it has blocked more than 3 million unlawful purchases. Other common sense solutions that decrease injury and death include firearm injury prevention research, implementation of extreme risk protection orders, education on safe storage to end family fire, investing in safe technology, expanding access to behavioral health services, and improving victim services. We have both the opportunity and the responsibility to comprehensively address gun violence as the true public health crisis that it is. This is not a Democrat versus a Republican issue. It's a uniquely American issue, and it's uniquely in each of your hands to help fix it. The America I'm fighting for is one where parents no longer have to fear the phone call that my parents received, that the Parkland parents received, and literally hundreds of others in communities across this country are receiving every single day. As a trauma surgeon, I have to look into the eyes of these parents, and it's nothing less than heartbreaking. So the medical community implores you, the time for action is now. There's no one solution to this complex health problem, which is why we must come together as a country to build consensus and support and develop a research-informed, data-driven approach so that we can help you, as our policymakers, ensure the public safety of Americans all across this great nation. Thank you.
Thank you, Major Tap Harper.
Thank you, Chairman Nadler and members of the House Judiciary Committee for inviting me here to testify today. My name is Sabrina Tap Harper, and I'm the commander of the Domestic Violence Unit of the Baltimore City Sheriff's Office in Baltimore, Maryland. I'm here today to talk about the dangers that weak gun laws pose on our community, specifically for women and families who are victims of domestic violence. The data is clear. Victims of domestic violence are at an increased risk of gun violence in this country. In the United States, women are 11 times more likely to be killed with a gun than women in comparable countries. Much of this fatal violence against women is committed by intimate partners. According to the FBI, almost half of the murders of women were committed by current or former husbands or a boyfriend, 10 times as many as by a male stranger. According to the American Journal of Public Health, the presence of a firearm in a domestic violence situation increases the risk of a homicide for a woman by 500%. These numbers miss many of the murders committed by ex-boyfriends who are seldom accurately categorized and who may account for another 300 to 400 of the 1,000 intimate partner murders each year. The Violence Policy Center found that a gun was the weapon used in over half of the murders in which the weapon was known. Dr. Jacqueline Campbell's research has shown that gun access by a batterer is the single best predictor of whether a woman would be killed by him, increasing the risk of her murder by more than 5-fold. Abusers also use guns to terrorize their victims. While commanding the Domestic Violence Unit of the Baltimore City Sheriff's Office, one petitioner directed my deputies to an assault rifle that had been buried in the ground for over 10 years and was still fully operable when recovered. The respondent in this particular case was also federally prohibited from owning firearms. Domestic abusers hide weapons in any place they can. I know of deputies directed by petitioners who have recovered hidden firearms in washing machines and air conditioning units as well. In a study of over 400 women in domestic violence shelters in California, 2/3 of the women who reported a firearm in their home said their intimate partner used a gun against them, with over 70% threatening to shoot or kill her, 5% actually shooting at her. That same study found that only 1 in 20 abused women who had access to a gun reported ever having used it in self-defense against her abuser. Another study found that among California handgun purchasers, women who had purchased guns had a 50% increased risk of homicide, all of which could be attributed to homicide by an intimate partner. Having access to a gun did not make these women safer. It is worth noting that mass shootings, those shootings involving the death of 4 or more people, disproportionately affect women. In an analysis of such shootings conducted by the research arm of Everytown for Gun Safety, in at least 54% of mass shootings, the shooter murdered or injured a current or former partner or family member, and most of these shootings took place in the homes. Background checks and laws restricting domestic abusers from owning weapons appear to be effective. Another analysis of Everytown found that states with stronger gun laws, including states that require background checks on every gun sale, reported lower rates of intimate partner gun homicides of women than states with weaker gun laws. There's also evidence that state laws to strengthen firearm prohibitions against domestic abusers reduce intimate partner homicides. Law enforcement officers in this country are most often tragically killed in traffic-related incidents and domestic-related matters. Greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. Those of us who do this important work each day need strong laws that restrict firearm access to the most dangerous, based on the best available evidence and strong enforcement of existing laws. This would include policies like closing loopholes that exempt private gun sales and gun shows from background checks, ensuring that all states have laws restricting possession and gun sales to those subject to domestic violence restraining orders and domestic violence misdemeanors, ensuring that states with such laws are removing firearms when allowed and strictly enforcing the law, and amending federal laws to include dating partners who research indicates perpetrates a substantial portion of intimate partner homicide of women. We all have a responsibility to act on the facts supported by research data to establish legal perimeters to keep us all safe. Thank you for inviting me here today to share my views on this critically important public safety issue. I am happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Acevedo.
Good morning, Chairman Nadler, Ranking Member Collins, and distinguished members of Congress, and especially Sheila Jackson Lee, who's not only been a champion and a lion on this issue for a long time, but is actually my Congresswoman. So I live in her district.
Chief, could I just say, is there also, because she does such an eloquent job, you ought to take her everywhere for your introduction at this point.
Thank you. I think I'll try that. And obviously Congresswoman Garcia, who we've worked with for so many years at the state level, and Mr. Correa and others that we've worked with over the years. I speak today to all of you both as the police chief of Houston and president of the Major City Chiefs Association, representing the largest police departments in the nation, where gun violence truly takes its greatest toll. I'm also honored to speak for the U.S. Conference of Mayors and to attach their membership resolution, which was submitted yesterday. Mayors and chiefs have formed an unprecedented alliance with others to address gun violence in our nation. On June 8th, I had the privilege to join the U.S. Conference of Mayors in Boston, along with Mayor Sylvester Turner of Houston and the president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, President Stephen Benjamin of Columbia, South Carolina, where they unanimously adopted our position paper on gun violence and reducing gun violence. And I'd like to introduce Laura Waxman, who's here today representing the nation's mayor. Laura, if you can wave. You know, it's important to realize that firearms policy is not a zero-sum proposition. We all urge that you let common sense guide you as you pursue the development of public policies that balance the long-adopted Second Amendment rights of our fellow Americans with the need to combat the scourge of daily gun violence throughout our nation. This gun violence is arguably one of the greatest public health epidemics facing the nation everyone in this room loves and serves. Chiefs of police and sheriffs join the victims in asking you to act now to prevent one more death and bloodshed. We implore you to consider multiple steps and measures to curb the ongoing threat of gun violence. The universal background check, expanded mental health provisions, red flag legislations are measures that we know will work. The time is now to make sure that next process with the process universal and we get rid of the gaps and loopholes that defeat the purpose of which they were intended. Next week, we've invited members of Congress, I think Mr. Thompson, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, and others will be joining the Major City Chiefs and the sheriffs here in Washington to have a roundtable on this issue. And if you have not been invited, I'd like to extend that invitation to all members here today. We hope again that as this debate continues, that we realize that doing nothing is not acceptable. And while we really focus, and the media focuses, on the multitudes of the almost regular mass shootings in our country that the media covers, for every one of those, sons and daughters, our children, our family members, our police officers are being shot, killed, and maimed. And I would urge Congress to do something this term. It's our time to make a difference, because our streets, our neighborhoods are truly drowning in the blood of our victims and in the tears of their loved ones. And at this moment in time, I'd like to tell the young people from Parkland, Santa Fe, and beyond in the March for Our Lives that the Major City Chiefs is proud to stand with you. The future belongs to you, and we are here to help you secure it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chief. Professor Malcolm.
Thank you very much for inviting me to testify here before the committee. All of us are here today with the same goal. We want to increase public safety. We want to protect the lives of the citizens of our country.
Informants and all denied making a buy foregoings from the residence located at 7815 Harding Street and never purchasing narcotics from Regina Nicholas or Dennis Tuttle. The police chief says the fallout has lots of officers upset.
There are a lot of angry cops because when you violate that oath of office, you make it hard for 99% of these cops that go out there every day that you all know them. You make their job difficult.
Search warrant shows a major problem. At one point, the investigating officers wrote in the warrant, quote, raid where 5 officers were injured and Dennis and Regina Tuttle were killed. The latest search warrant shows a major problem. At one point, the investigating officers wrote in the warrant, quote, find on Officer Rodriguez interviewed all of the confidential informants and all denied making a buy foregoings from the residence located at 7815 Harding Street.
God bless the Republic.
Yes, to the New World Order.
We shall prevail, ladies and gentlemen. The empire is on the run.
And we are on the march, day and night.
Hoorah. Thank you, gentlemen. Guys, we'll be back at 8 o'clock. Meanwhile, BC coming up next. Don't you touch that dial, because we got a lot more live radio on Liberty Tree Radio.
Plant the seed in our homeland, boys. Let it grow where all can see. Feed it with our devotion, boys. Call it the Liberty Tree. It's a tall old tree and a strong old tree. And we are the sons, yes, we are the sons of liberty. Save it from the storm, boys. Water down its roots with tea. And the sun will always shine on the old Liberty Tree. It's a tall old tree and a strong old tree. And we are the sons, yes, we are the sons of liberty. March along with the piper, boys, we were born forever free. Let's go pay the piper, boys, beneath the Liberty Tree. It's a tall old tree and a strong old tree. And we are the sons, yes, we are the sons of liberty. Pay the price they're asking, boys, always pay the tyrant's fee. Never...
Bringing you the sound of the revolution. Thank you for listening to LibertyTreeRadio.4mg.com.
We all